I've been running from a part of my life, but after what happened recently, I don't know if I'll ever truly escape it. I used to be involved in some questionable paid companionship. The people in charge of me didn't care if I was free, alive, or dead as long as I made the money. Getting out took careful planning. I changed my number, sold my car, and moved across town as far as I could go. I landed my first legitimate job as a remote customer service rep, then settled into what would be my hideaway until I saved up enough money to leave the state. In some of the nicer neighborhoods, plenty of rich people have vacation homes with basement and in-law suites. They don't typically list their properties on rental sites, which is great for not being found, but I charmed my way into a month-to-month lease with a family who wanted their big empty house to earn some money while they weren't using it. Of course, all I rented was the basement. The windows were small and mostly concealed by thick flower bushes. The outside door was hidden in the garage, which I had to code to. The door into the house didn't lock, but the homeowners installed a latch on my side. For a few months, everything went exactly as planned. I was the only person living on the property. I rarely showed my face. I was a hermit, sure, but I was safe, or at least I thought so. Last week, a storm raged through town. I wasn't scared of it though. It felt like another extra layer of concealment. The heavy rain and the rolling thunder were like a thick, soft blanket. Wind battered the house above me, but I was underground, safe from the world. Then the power went out. My heart jumped from the suddenness of it, but then I calmed down. There was enough light from the setting sun sifting through the storm to guide me to my altar. It held bowls of bones and spells, crystals and sage witchy things. Not that I necessarily believed in all of it, but at this point in my life, I'll pray to anyone who will listen. For the moment though, all I cared about were the candles. I lit all of them, giving myself a little island of light as the day turned into night and the storm raged on. However, I couldn't enjoy my serene setup for long before a new noise interrupted the pristine background of rain. It sounded like footsteps, but not upstairs, more like it was outside. In the storm, I saw a flash of movement through a window. It wasn't just another curtain of rain or a branch bouncing in the wind. I saw another glimpse of it a few seconds later. In the very next window, a pair of boots traipsing through the bushes. Immediately, I turned back to my altar and blew out every candle, then froze. The darkness was more smothering than before, hopefully enough to hide me, but from who? I didn't like it when anyone was outside, even if it was just the landscapers or the mailman, let alone a random person. At 6 p.m., during the biggest storm of the year, my heart was racing again, and this time, it didn't settle down. My only comforting thought was that they might be utility workers trying to get the power back on, but then again, that only happened a few minutes ago. A response that quick meant they were waiting outside the gate. Not a comforting thought. I remained motionless, watching and listening. The storm continued indifferently, washing out any further sounds of footsteps outside, if there were any. In reality, it was worse. The footsteps grew closer, encroaching beyond simply being in the yard to being inside the house right above my head. Right then, I was holding back a full-blown panic attack by telling myself it had to be the homeowners. They never told me they were coming, but maybe they got distracted during the storm and forgot. Regardless, I texted them to find out. I waited anxiously for several minutes with waves of chills crashing through my body. I threw on a blanket, but the noises in the house above me would not stop wandering, and I could not get warm. Every time I looked at my phone, it was empty. No response from the homeowner. I had to call them. I didn't want to speak, but I had to take the risk that I might be heard. It rang, and rang, until finally the woman picked up. I cupped my hand over the microphone and whispered, asking if she or anyone else was supposed to be at the house. She said no. Just then, my door rattled. Softly. It was the interior door, which would have opened had they not drilled a new lock just for me. A moment later, it shook again. More violently this time. It wasn't air pressure. Someone was trying to get in. How did they know I was here? How did they get in? Most importantly, how the hell was I going to get out? I couldn't stay. It was only a matter of time before they broke through that little latch. Struggling to stay quiet, I pleaded with the homeowner to call the police. I wish she had an alarm system, but it was too late. She always said the neighborhood was so nice, she didn't need one. Yeah, right. Not with me around. I wasn't certain, but my gut was telling me the people I had been running from had found me. What better time to strike than during a blackout caused by a catastrophic thunderstorm? I had no way of knowing if they were aware of the other entrance in the garage, but I didn't want to leave that way. It was at the front of the house. If anyone was keeping watch, they would see me before I could slide under. The windows were my only way out, the same ones I saw these people walking past just moments ago. It wasn't safe either, but at least they were shrouded, and I could look outside to see if anyone was there. I mostly saw vegetation and rain, but nobody was immediately outside. I began stacking the most stable objects I could underneath the window. I was nearly able to reach it, but then the entire basement shook with a bang. They were beating down the door. I looked over and I saw it looking almost normal, but it had already given in a bit. A few more strikes and it would crumble like paper. I had to go. I unlocked and pushed open the window, letting in a blast of freezing cold rain. I put my arms through and scrambled for a handhold, hearing the door get slammed again. I dug my fingers into the soil and heaved up my legs one by one through the window. Though I wasn't free just yet, inside below me, the door finally gave out. I heard them shouting, and I didn't look back. I forced my way through the bush, soaked and blinded by whipping rain, stuck with thorns in my bare foot. As soon as I made it to the other side, I made a blind dash for the neighbor's fence. I knew where it was better than I could see it, and thankfully it wasn't too tall. I clumsily slammed into it, then slipped over the top, nearly falling backwards, but I landed on my feet and kept running. At the neighbor's door, I banged and screamed for help. I was too afraid to look back to see if I was still being chased. I wouldn't know where else to go if they had caught up. Fortunately, my cries were answered quickly. A confused and concerned teenager opened the door and ushered me inside on sight. When the door was locked, I felt a bit relieved, but I couldn't calm down until the police arrived. It hasn't been that long though. They are still looking for whoever broke in. I think I know who it is, but heck, my luck might just be that bad. It could be an entirely new person after me for much simpler reasons. One thing I know for sure, I no longer feel safe in that basement. I thought I was well hidden, far away from people trying to hurt me. Known or unknown, I was wrong. Danger still found me. I've been staying at the neighbor's house for the past few days, but I don't know what my next move is. I don't think I'll ever be able to run far enough to be free from my past.
Back in the winter, I had returned home to New York City and was getting used to the usual slept on the subway to get to and from work and run the city in general. I hate the subway as an overarching sentiment towards the MTA. I'd always called it the bane of my existence because it challenged me in all the areas I'm sensitive about. Close proximity to strangers, claustrophobic spaces, temperature extremes, mysteriously foul smells, pests and vermin. Overall, it's convenient and tolerable on a good day, but I still had my fair share of unfortunate encounters over the years that led me to regard the subway as a less than ideal mode of transportation around the city. This one, early evening on a Sunday, solidified my thinking. I had just left a breast cancer fundraiser event around 7 p.m. and was only going a few stops over to where my house was on the train. My little sister and I sat chatting quietly as the train began to move. A medium-build man with a great Pico and Zabini made eye contact with me and hurried over. He bent down close to my face, extending his arm out for a handshake and said, "Hello there. You're very beautiful. How are you doing? What's your name?" I sort of just recoiled back, giving him a confused, "What are you doing in my personal space?" kind of look, shaking my head in clear disinterest and making his acquaintance. All of a sudden, it was like a switch flipped and his previously sweet, "You think you're better than everyone? You ain't. You're ugly. Get out of here." He screamed at the top of his lungs, and I noticed everyone's hurting and staring at our direction. "Screw you anyway," he said. He made a waving off gesture while I kind of just sat there staring at him wide-eyed, wondering what he was going to do next. His entire stance was very aggressive, and he then stopped screaming and, to my surprise, made a direct pass to try the same exact thing on my sister, who was right next to me. "Wow, you're beautiful too. Can I shake your hands?" and he reached directly next to me to touch her. Absolute nerve. I extended my arm and firmly said, "Hey, leave my sister alone and back up off our space." This guy smacks my hand out of the way. Now he's fully pushed my blunts. I stand up and realize I'm about eye level with him. So he must have been around 5'9", maybe 5'10", or 5'11" at most. "Don't touch my sister," said. And I was officially heated. This part is a blur, as I don't remember what he said when he pushed me, and we began to scuffle, but I landed a very sweet uppercut of his jaw. This enraged him, and he had me on my back within seconds, kicking me and screaming, threatening me in all kinds of ways. After what felt like an eternity, 2 good people on the subway had run up behind him and grabbed them off me.
I heard one guy say, "Leave her alone, dude." And when I looked up, I saw several horrified passengers staring at us as we had engaged in a full-on brawl. Adrenaline was pumping through my veins, so everything was bright. My vision was pinpoint and I felt numb. The conductor said something over the speakers about holding the train to platform, and I stood there shaking as guys threw him onto the platform and made a barrier between the platform and the door as he attempted to get back in the car, calling out the air and sputtering curses at me, staring me in the eye. Subway doors finally closed, locking him out. He pounded on them as though possessed by a demon, screaming so loud you could see every vein in his neck as he pounded on the glass. His eyes were so bloodshot they almost glowed red, and his voice was so loud it pierced through the entire car, threatening me in ways that I will not repeat here. Then the subway car pulled away from the station. Someone pointed to the grounds. He had dropped his cell phone in the altercation, and it was unlocked. Found out everything I could about this crazy stranger. His name, his social media handles, all of the selfies, and the fact he had been trying very hard and was unsuccessful at getting laid. His text messages revealed he was a drug dealer of some sort. I suspected crack because of the prices, increments, and wording of the text, which would kind of also explain his violent outburst. I'd seen my fair share of crazy in New York City, but it hadn't gotten this up close and personal in years. I was shaken and emotional following the attack. I went to the police station with my aunt and uncle soon after, and I was following a report when one of the cops at the police station said, "If it turns out that you stole this phone from this guy, you're going to be in a lot of trouble." Deadass straight to my face implies that I stole this phone from a complete stranger on the subway and was now spitting some elaborate web that included turning myself in at a police station when I was following a report of an assault. I wasn't wrong in thinking that the guy wasn't going to be much help. I gave them his full name, and they said they had a lot of people in the system with the same name. I said, "Well, I have all the specific info I got off the phone." They said they couldn't use anything off the phone without a warrant. They ended up taking his cell phone on me, and nothing really came of it except for the ginormous bruise I had from getting a blunt kick to the thigh. An officer came by my house a few months later with some photos of extremely similar-looking men, none of whom I could confidently identify as my assailant. Haven't heard a single thing since I followed the rapport, and I couldn't find the guy on social media again. So, this lunatic is out there probably riding the subway somewhere, waiting for the next girl to reject a handshake, so he can go absolutely batshit crazy. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened had it been late at night with nobody around to help me. That guy was screaming that he was going to kill me, and I'm sure he would have given the chance.
In my first year of university, I ended up in a situation where I'm still convinced that I got off a lot luckier than I could have, considering the circumstances. It was early January, and our university lectures had been cancelled due to the heavy amount of snow that had built up overnight. I'm British, so when so much as a couple of grains fall, the news will go on about it. This was a proper amount for England, though. The kind of thick, fresh snow that you have to ever so carefully trudge through on pavements because it's thick and your shoes will sink in a little bit with each footstep. and it's slippery or slightly icy in some places, which means one should approach with caution. It was late afternoon, and my boyfriend, who was in his third and final year of my course, had invited me over to his house that weekend. I rarely stayed in my first-year flat at this point because half of the flat I resided in was one where the students lived with would often loudly party and come back at 5 a.m. each night, drunk out of their minds. I was more of an introvert, and I would go and drink with my friends that lived in student halls about 20 minutes away from ours, but I did not actually get on so well with my flatmates, as one of them would always about me and make rumors for her amusement. I mentioned this now, so later makes more sense. No, my flatmates didn't attack me or anything like that.
I just remember not bothering to really tell them about what happened because A, they never actually noticed when I was in or not, and B, they were usually too drunk to care. It was about 6 p.m. at night and getting quite dark. I texted my boyfriend before and said that I'd meet him halfway in town outside the local Tesco. He had a lot of final year work that he'd been doing from his house, and I didn't really want to make him have to trudge all the way to my flat in this weather. So I insisted that I meet him outside Tesco, get some ingredients and bits, and then I'd make us a nice dinner that night while he worked and try to help him stay motivated. After this incident, never again did he ever want me to really walk alone in the dark to his house. Even now, 2 years later, now that I'm in my final year, and he has graduated, he still has nightmares about what could have happened to me that evening, and he'll always make sure I feel safe if we're going somewhere at night. At about 6 p.m., I began to trudge down the long roads from my flat, which went past the smaller campus and a couple of newsagents. To turn down a very long road, many of us used to exit onto the main road leading to town. It was a road, but it was also like an alleyway in a way. There were the backs of houses on one side of the road and part of the university on the other. To give you a better idea of how long I mean, I've attached photos, but obviously I've blurred out the road's name. I'd walked this way numerous times before this incident, both alone with others if we stayed behind at university until quite late. So, I was stupid and didn't really ever expect anything to happen. After all, it was literally right next to our university and we had security. But I was so very wrong. I was in my hooded Parker buttons all the way to my chin to keep warm with a bag over my shoulder, just with bits and bobs. Nothing fancy. I got to about a third of the way down, and I was near passing this little section on the right here. On the right, I don't know if it's obvious, but part of the building protrudes outwards, creating a sort of corner just before the black pillars. I never thought much of it before, but it was clear that afterwards, even in the daytime, I would always check it out of paranoia. As I passed the university gates, I heard sets of footsteps running from further back behind me. I really to this day don't know why I didn't question it sooner, and I think that in the last second, I had to actually turn around. My hood was puffy, and I couldn't actually turn my head to the side to see. I'd have to turn my entire body around or pull my hood down. It was also incredibly difficult to hear until it was likely too late to react. Although the road was not too thick in snow compared to the one I walked down, it was still fairly covered in new snow that had settled before. And with a thick, fluffy hood up, my hearing was probably a bit muffled. They were far enough to possibly turn arounds, and even then, I would not have seen their damn faces. It all happened in milliseconds. I had my hood up when it did. I felt an awful, painful slam into my back that shocked me greatly. To my horror, I realized that a thick arm was tightly wrapped around my neck under my chin. Even now, I'm absolutely sure I felt something hard being held against my neck, even though my park is puffy material. In front of me were a couple of other figures, all hooded, and I could not see their faces. I was in absolute horror, but I thought it was some kind of joke in those first milliseconds. And the chokehold would not budge. They had me held against them, and I was being dragged relentlessly down the rest of the road. I could hardly shout. I was having a panic attack. My throat was closed up, and I thought I was literally going to die. and my boyfriend would have no idea why I was late, and somebody would end up finding my body when it was too late. I remember all of those thoughts going through my head. My boyfriend and I had only confessed to each other the month before, after both having crushes on each other for a few months prior to this. I just settled in and gotten to know my friends as well, and I'd only really just started university. I didn't want it to just all end right then and there. I was dragged violently. My boots were scraping the snowy concrete, and although I wanted to struggle and scream, I was in complete shock. I mustered up a slight course, "Let go of me," if I remember correctly, but I could hard form sentences, and my throat scratched as I tried to shout it. It was pointless. There were at least 3 bulky figures, one of them slightly to my side, but in my line of sight, and I could only really see a thick chin of stubble. I was slammed back against the grounds, a fluffy hood pillowing the back of my head by whoever had gotten me in a chokehold as they'd pulled me violently. And as I looked up in horror in that last second, they had been looming over me. Tears filled my eyes, and I couldn't breathe. And then, just as quickly as it happened, they ran away and turned right on the main road. It led the town if you turned left, hence more towards the rougher part of town if you turned right. That hadn't surprised me. I had shakenly gotten up in shock, and I slowly trudged down the last third of the road, still not even sure what the heck had really just happened. I shakily got my phone on my Parker's left pocket. I say this now, I keep my valuables close to my body and never in my bag. Yeah, you guys can see where this is going now, right? I'm very bad at building up suspense, though. Forgive me if you wanted something that would be a little more. I shakily called him, and he picked up almost instantly. I was due to meet with him soon.
I remember bursting into tears properly and shaking violently as I'd finally been on the pavement of the main road out off the alley road where it was safe to call. Told him I might be a little late and he could hear I was panicking. I could barely form words, but I managed to say the name of the huge building just up the road so he'd know where I was. I only realized at this point that my bag was missing. I know I didn't have anything too precious in that bag, although I did have some charms on it that a close friend had given me, and some of my art supplies were in there, alongside a can of cherry tango. A random satch of chicken seasoning I remembered to bring to his this time to use with a roast dinner, and some sanitary towels, as well as some chapstick. Anything like my phone and wallet, those were always in my sides of my Parker. After this, I've started keeping my phone down one pocket of my brilliance, my cards in the other, even in the day, just to be safe, despite the odd looks I'll occasionally get when getting either out. I managed to tell just a couple of young guys walking further down the road what had happened since that I was waiting for my boyfriend. But I was too scared to walk alone, so they walked with me. If you're both out there still, thank you for that. By the way, I was a small girl with black hair that randomly came up to you crying near that crossing, and you didn't know me, but you were both so kind to walk with me for that short time.
And as we got to the other side of the main road to begin walking down the turning into town, my boyfriend appeared, bolting down the pavement as he saw my crying face and pulled me into his arms. The 2 guys sort of nodded and said to have a safe night and continued on. Out of breath, I realized how fast he must have run, though. His house was a good walk on the other side of town. I remember feeling relieved to be there with him, but I also felt guilty knowing he'd run through the snow to me when he was already stressing about deadlines. We got quickly to his house and I cried some more as I explained. Even though I said I hadn't seen them clearly enough, we called the police to report the location and time because it was obviously premeditated and they might have been regulars that were waiting for the unsuspecting person to pass at night. They quickly came over as I sat shaking with him. His housemates also curious as to what happened. I remember nestling into him and my skin wouldn't warm up at all, but he kept me close and I was grateful for his comfort. When the door knocked, we quickly went downstairs to find a policeman at the door and a policewoman with him. They came into the hallway, and they had brought me one of those little panic alarms after we'd called and explained what happened. They then said they'd take me to the station. My boyfriend came with me as we sat in the back of their car. He squeezed my hand quietly as we made small talk with both of them, directing them to where it happened as they wanted to drive by, and then quickly inspect the road. No evidence, just many footprints and tracks. The policewoman said they would later inquire and knock on each house that was on that one side of the road later. Although was a spoiler, no. Nobody saw anything nor heard anything. My attackers were incredibly quiet and swift about the whole thing. We were then driven to the police station, and I remember calming down. They were both very kind and got us something to drink as we sat in one of those interrogation rooms. I was friendly with them but still shaking, as I explained the events in vivid detail and knew the time when it happened. And we concluded that they had likely waited in that little corner I mentioned before. That one walks past and doesn't really notice anything. Hiding in that corner would be shrouded in the shadows. Once those 1 or 2 hours were over, they even dropped us off outside Tesco. Looking back, it was quite hilarious how confused and suspicious the security guard near the exit looked when he saw us emerge from the police car and go in. We still had dinner, and I still cooked, but he did so with me. And when I found it hard to sleep that night, we stayed up and just talked about it and what could have happened and been worse. Even now, he sometimes has bad dreams about alternate endings to this. The police never did find my bag or the hooded attackers. I'd managed to describe their height and builds roughly, but all we really knew was that they were definitely all male, and they seemed experienced enough that it might have happened before. That, and if I had not had my pocket buttons all the way up, or my hood pulled up, I might have felt something worse than just the hardness through my collar. And the landing against the road would not have been cushioned on the back of my head. I'm convinced that the man tied across my neck had been holding a weapon of some kind. If they were mocking me, at the least, I'm a lot more careful nowadays.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe, or follow for more stories on Fun Tales for All.